The Church of Scientology have just been dealt yet another humiliating blow in their plans for expansion of their UK headquarters at St Hill near East Grinstead in Sussex. Yes, today we're going to be talking about a planning application. It doesn't sound very exciting, but trust me, it's juicy. But first, let's say hello to everybody in the chat. Danielle Chamberlain is here. Thank you so much for joining. SP Crusader, Leanie's in the house, the wonderful moderator, reminding everybody to please press that like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and after the live stream finishes, make sure you leave a comment down below, and that helps the algorithm push the video out to more people. Love It is in the house. Hey all, what you know, actually making it alive on time. How is everybody? Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Love It. Kestrel42 is also in the house. Alex, I've been waiting all week for this update. Bring the pain. Oh boy, you're going to like this one. Oh, we've also got some new people that have joined just while I was looking at those tweets. Petrie Nara is in the house. John is here. Thank you so much for joining. Professor Carr Khan, Becky, Big Brother fan, Sweet Liberty. Great to see some familiar faces. Thank you so much for joining. So if you want to read the article on my blog, Scientology Business, the link is down below. I'm not going to be reading it straight off. I'm going to share some pictures first off. So we're talking about the IAS event. The IAS is Scientology's official membership body. It stands for International Association of Scientologists, and every year they have an annual gathering at their UK headquarters. David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology, is at the helm of the event. Celebrities like Tom Cruise usually goes to this event. It's held in a massive marquee, a giant tent that they erect on the grounds of their property in order to host this event, because the property isn't big enough to host the thousands of Scientologists that descend upon St Hill from all across Europe to hear Miscavige speak. And indeed, this is the tent that they have put up this year for the event. It is a huge erection, and it is also an unwanted erection. Just look at the scale of this thing. It's not just one, but it's three. If you look carefully, this is what they call the Grand Marquee, which is where the event itself is held. On the left and the right, you can see the marquee is flanked by two other really large structures, which are used to house the catering for the patrons ball on the Saturday, and also the seminar tent where they hold seminars on the Saturday during the day. To give you an idea of the scale of this construction, just look, this walkway here that's leading to the tent, you can see it's a raised platform. There's a person standing there in a high-vis jacket, and on the other side you can just about see someone poking up above the flooring here. So you can see this is a large scale erection, and it is one that they erect without planning permission. They have put this marquee up in the Sussex countryside without permission. It is an illegal structure. And to give you an idea of the scale of this thing, here's a picture that was uploaded to social media by a Scientologist recently that shows St Hill Castle in the foreground, which is where they deliver the sacred OT materials. This is where Scientologists learn about Xenu, the overgalactic warlord that dropped H-bombs on volcanoes 75 million years ago. Of course, you have to pay a lot of money to learn that Scientology piece of scripture. And not every Scientologist knows that, but it is in their scripture. And you can see behind the castle is this giant marquee. It is by no means a small temporary structure. It is huge in its scale, and erecting such a large structure in Sussex does indeed cause a lot of damage to the environment. Here's a picture that I took on a walk recently in the local area, and you can clearly see just how churned up the ground is here. Now, I think it's really important to note that this structure is located in an area of outstanding natural beauty. That is a protected part of the countryside. There is extra scrutiny and all that sort of thing attached to trying to develop in this area. Essentially, an AONB is a protection because people don't want the countryside to be developed. And so in order to build in an AONB, you have to go through extra levels of scrutiny. There has to be multiple people consulted on the plans. And so they're avoiding all of this because they haven't applied for planning permission for this tent. But they have detailed in their own documents, which we'll get through to shortly, the damage that this structure does to the AONB. And let's not forget, the purpose of an AONB is to prevent damage to the countryside. And indeed, in a planning application that they have submitted, which we'll get to shortly, they've included their own pictures, which shows just how damaged the land gets when they build this structure. In fact, their own caption says tent frame erected with field badly damaged by vehicles and weather. Down below, you can see here there's lots of tracks from the heavy machinery that they use in the construction of this thing, and they've described it as damaged field during event preparation. Now, I mentioned that they haven't got planning permission for this thing, but what they have done is applied for permission to redevelop a large portion of their compound. And I call it a compound because that's what it is. If you are a Sea Org member, somebody that works for the Church of Scientology, you are not allowed to leave this property without prior permission. Sea Org members are provided berthing communally. A lot of people live in bedrooms with like 5 or 6 other adults. In Crowborough, a village about 45 minutes away, they are transported to and from the St. Hill compound every day to work by bus. That is a bus that's provided by Scientology. They are provided food and supposedly accommodation for their 7 days a week of service. You're not allowed to leave the property without permission, so it is a compound. Now, they haven't applied for permission for the actual tent itself, but they have applied to redevelop part of this compound. And what they want to do is basically create a giant car park for over 600 cars and put in permanent infrastructure in the field where they have the tent in order to support the construction of this temporary marquee every year. So the planning application mentions the marquee, but it stops short of actually asking for permission to build the marquee. Nonetheless, they've built the marquee. It's there and it is huge. But in this planning application, they've included a large number of photos and diagrams and so on, and that's where these pictures came from. This is a rendering of the new entrance that they want to build to this property. At the moment, this is just a little dirt track on St. Hill Road, and you can see on the right-hand side here, this is the new car park. And what they propose to do is essentially pave over part of the field with a permanent hard-standing car park, which is this area here. And the rest of the field, they want to install a geocell structure, which essentially means it will look like a field, apparently, for most of the year, but it has a reinforced plastic geocell structure that means cars can drive over it so that it can be used as a car park when they hold this large event. You can see here at the bottom right, they do already have a car park with 132 spaces, and their own planning application admits to this being sufficient for their daily use. So this whole planning application is centered around redeveloping a huge portion of land in a protected area of outstanding natural beauty, simply for the purposes of a 3-day event once a year. And you can see the scale of this thing. This is a whole field that they're planning to turn into a giant car park. Now, I put together a little diagram myself using drone footage of St. Hill that was captured, was it last year or the year before? I can't remember. But I went down to St. Hill with a couple of friends, one of which has a drone flying license, and we got this great picture. And I've annotated it to show you the scale of this thing. So this here on the bottom is St. Hill Road. It's a dark country lane. It doesn't have sufficient lighting. The infrastructure just isn't there for an event of this scale. And you can see here on the left-hand side, St. Hill Manor, which is Scientology's UK headquarters. This is where L. Ron Hubbard, the founder, used to live. And you can see the shaded areas are where they're planning to do this redevelopment work. So the pink field on the right-hand side is the During field, and the red field on the left-hand side is the Hobbs field. The Hobbs field is where they erect this massive marquee. The During field is what they plan to turn into a car park, and that yellow section in the middle is this new sort of access route that they want to create in between these two fields. Now, the planning application talks about not just the car park and the event infrastructure, but it also talks about creating 2 new toilet blocks and an electronic substation, and of course, a new entrance to the property. Now, because of the scale of this thing, it is considered by the council a major development project. This is not a small car park, a small planning application. It's not an extension to a house. This is a huge project that Scientology are asking permission for. Public consultation has now finished, and a large number of local residents have written in with their concerns about the damage that this will do to the environment, about the impact that this event and the infrastructure will have on the local community. And indeed, it was found to be true based on Scientology's failed bid for a protest ban last year, that this event itself caused a lot of disruption to the local area. And my point remains firm that Scientology should be allowed to hold their event if they so want to. However, they should hold it somewhere else. This site is simply not suitable for their annual IES event, and by hosting the event at a purpose-built venue elsewhere, locally down the road, it would have a much smaller impact on the local environment, on the local infrastructure, and indeed the community. It would lead to less disruption, and it would lead to less countryside being damaged because they're using an already built, purpose-built venue for their event. Now, of course, Scientology won't do that because they are affirming their position that they should be able to hold their event on their own land. But I see this as a two-way thing. Either they continue hosting the event at St. Hill, but they massively scale it down so that they can hold the event in their Great Hall, which only holds about 500 or 700 people, or they take the event elsewhere and hire a venue like they currently do in Clearwater, Florida, and in Los Angeles, where they hold their annual New Year's celebration and LRH birthday celebration events. They already use purpose-built venues for those things. There's no reason why they can't do it at St. Hill in East Grinstead. Now, let's get to this humiliating blow that was dealt last night to this planning application. And the problem revolves around protected heritage assets. Now, this here is a picture of St. Hill Manor itself. Now, interestingly, St. Hill Manor is actually St. Hill House. Scientology call it a manor, but if you look at the historic records, it is actually St. Hill House. Scientology just like to call it manor so that it sounds more impressive and more historic. It is a beautiful piece of architecture. Scientology claim that it is open to the public, but it is indeed not. You have to book an appointment to go and have a tour around this thing, and obviously you won't get an appointment if you are a critic or a former member of the Church of Scientology. But nonetheless, it is a Grade 2 listed building, which means it's a protected historic asset. And this is Rockwood Park, which is another protected historic asset just over the road. This is a residential building owned by Scientologists, such as in fact, I'm not going to mention their names because I get a privacy strike whenever I mention a Scientologist's names. Well, not even a strike, just a complaint. But there is one well-known Scientologist known as Sheila, who is the mother of a very famous author. And she and many other Scientologists own this property, and it is a heritage asset. There are also a number of other buildings in the local area down by St. Hill Green, which are designated as sites of interest. They're not necessarily listed buildings, but they are heritage assets. And what has happened is Mid-Sussex District Council's conservation officer has submitted a very lengthy report opposing Scientology's application for this redevelopment work based on the negative impact that it will have on these heritage buildings, which is just makes it even more funny. The majority of these heritage buildings are actually owned by Scientology, so they are proposing to do damage to their own heritage assets, which is just hilarious. But let's have a little look at the letter that was written. Where are we? Let me get it up on my screen here, and I can share it. We're not going to read the whole thing because it is very lengthy, but if you do want to read the whole thing, it is on Scientology Business. The link is in the description. So this is the email, the representation that was that was sent to the council by the Heritage Conservation Officer. And we're going to read through here some of the history, because I do think it's actually quite interesting. St. Hill Manor is a Grade 2 listed neoclassical country house, constructed in 1792 and extensively altered in the 19th century. Originally known as St. Hill House, the building was constructed in 1792 for Gibbs Crawford, a member of Parliament, and had several subsequent notable owners before being requisitioned during World War II for use as a convalescent home for RAF officers undergoing reconstructive surgery at East Grinstead's Queen Victoria Hospital. the famous guinea pig club associated with pioneering surgeon Sir Archibald Macindoe. In 1959, it was purchased by L. Ron Hubbard, founder of the Scientology movement. The interior of the building includes the Monkey Room, which was painted with an elaborate mural showing 20 different species of monkey in 1945 by Winston Churchill's nephew, John Spencer Churchill. The building is set within landscaped gardens, which include a number of other buildings of varying dates. Beyond their immediate grounds, the setting of the house remains largely rural in character. Based on limited information in front of us, the house is likely to be considered to possess architectural interest based on its design, construction, craftsmanship, and decoration, historical illustrative value as a good example of a substantial late 18th century country house in the neoclassical style, aesthetic value, and associative value in relation to its various notable occupants, and association with the pioneering work at the Queen Victoria Hospital during World War II, and later Scientology. The house also has a group value with surviving historical buildings around it within the manor grounds, including the former stables to the southeast and the lodge building adjacent to the entrance driveway to the north, as well as a further lodge building to the east, which would be regarded as curtilage listed. So that means those buildings are also protected, even though they're not listed themselves, they're protected because they are part of the curtilage, the surrounding area of the Grade 2 listed St. Hill Manor. As such, the surviving rural setting of the manor would be considered to make a strong positive contribution to its special interest and the manner in which this is appreciated, in particular those parts that are of interest, blah, blah, blah. So it's saying it's an important site. It talks about North Lodge, which is another protected building that was built in the late 19th century nearby. It talks about other buildings in St. Hill Green. So North Lodge here, it's also talking about Rockwood Park, which I showed you a picture of earlier, and a number of other properties, such as Thaitania, which is just a funny name for a building because that's clearly been named based on Scientology parlance. That's number 1, St. Hill Green. Victoria Cottage, number 3, St. Hill Green. 4, St. Hill Green. 6 and 7, St. Hill Green. So these are all residential properties in the locality, and these are all similar in period and style and may have been constructed as part of a planned development. So essentially, the conservation officer is saying they need to be considered too. They're part of the grouping, but they're not listed. Gabriel's, which is another stone-built building in the local area, has significance. And then it talks about Rockwood Park itself. So it's very clear there's a lot of history in this area of East Grinstead. And let's have a look at what the conservation officer said in response to this planned application. Duringfield. So let's remember, Duringfield is the one on the right-hand side of that picture, which is going to be the car park. In respect of Duringfield, the proposed introduction of car parking throughout the space will have a marked impact on its character, which will be altered from an open, essentially rural field to a partly hard-surfaced car park of 760 car spaces. Although it is noted that the majority of the field would be a cell web rather than asphalt, the hard-surfaced area is quite extensive. It's located adjacent to the road and to the main entrance to St. Hill, as well as the proposed altered vehicle entrance from this road, and it's the urbanising impact of the hard-surfaced car park, let's start that again. And it's the urbanising impact of the hard-surfaced car park will be exacerbated by the provision of lighting columns, EV charging points, and other paraphernalia. I think the grammar isn't quite correct in that sentence. The plastic cell web structure, although it is designed to allow grass to grow through it, is also an artificial material and is likely to have an adverse visual impact on the rural character of the field, particularly when the grass is mown short for events and/or during prolonged dry periods. The adverse impact on this part of the field will be intensified by what appears on plan to be permanent hard landscape divisions between the parking lanes. It is not clear how individual bays and/or directions of travel are to be demarcated, and it would be helpful if this could be further clarified. So the conservation officer here is calling out Scientology for supplying inadequate plans for their redevelopment. In terms of lighting, this appears to be proposed only to the permanent parking area and consists of a number of 6-metre high columns as well as combined electric vehicle and lighting pillars. From the submitted lighting strategy, the resulting level of illumination of the area appears fairly intensive and will have a further urbanising impact on the character of the field, particularly at night. In terms of understanding the visual impact of the fittings themselves in daytime, it would be useful if these could be clearly and individually marked on the submitted landscaping plan, with accompanying notes showing the appearance of each fitting type in the key. This will allow a clearer understanding of the cumulative appearance of the various works within the area. The proposed toilet block within the field is centrally located between the hard and cell-webbed surfaced areas. This is a relatively prominent position and will further detract from the currently rural character of the space. The alterations to the existing vehicle access to the northern end of the road frontage includes removal of adjacent trees and hedging to allow for improved visibility displays. Any significant loss of vegetation to either side of the entrance or enlargement of the access itself will be considered to adversely affect the rural character of St. Hill and the positive contribution that it makes to the settings of the above-mentioned heritage assets. However, the information in front of us is currently insufficient to allow fully informed consideration of this aspect of the proposals. I would suggest that the applicant, i.e. Scientology, should be requested to provide fully detailed existing and proposed plans of the entrance layout and adjacent frontage, detailing any changes to the extent and nature of the access and its surfacing, as well as any vegetation which will be lost. Existing and proposed elevations of this part of the road frontage should also be provided. In addition, the proposed hard-surfaced access road across the northern side of the field will further detract from its currently rural character. Now, that's what she's saying regarding the during field. And I'm going to take you back to this plan just so you guys have an idea of the precise location of this area that is being talked about here, because those comments are just in relation to this parking lot here in the new field and the entrance that they plan to create up here on the top of the property. So this is the entrance that they're talking about, and we're talking about the pink field over here on the right hand side, the during field, which is going to be the car park. We haven't even started talking about the event space, the Hobbs field, and the marquee yet. So far, what we've got is a pretty damning report, and certainly a humiliating blow for Scientology's planning officers and legal team, who are being called out here for providing insufficient and inadequate information relating to their proposals. Now, let's carry on, because it does have a lot more. She does have a lot more to say here. Further to the above physical alterations to the space and the associated visual impacts, there will be a marked increase in noise and business to the area, particularly when the temporary car parking is also in use. This will exacerbate the harm caused to the rural character of the setting of the affected assets. Therefore, although I note the revisions which have been made to the scheme, including the reduction in the area of the hard landscaping and the introduction of some areas of planting, it remains in my opinion that in combination these works will remove and reverse the positive impact which During Field currently makes through setting to the significances of the various heritage assets identified above. Now, what the conservation officer here is talking about is Scientology submitted a pre-application advice request earlier this year, or I think it might have been last year, where they basically went to the council and said, hey, we want to do this thing. Can you give us some advice on what you recommend before we actually submit the application? And that was all confidential, but it has all been revealed in this planning application because Scientology have made mention and reference to this pre-planning application advice. And it is very clear that what they actually wanted to do is completely pave over the entire field to make a permanent hard-standing car park. The council said they weren't happy with that because of the impact it would have on the local area and the landscaping and so on. And so what Scientology did was review the plans and change it slightly so that only a portion of the field is actually going to be tarmacked over and the rest of it will be this geocell structure. Now, what the conservation officer is saying here is even with those revisions in mind, the development in this field will create a negative impact and should therefore be rejected. Let's have a little look at what else she's got to say, because it does carry on. This is talking about the specific uh, policies and such that are going to be adversely affected as a result of this. It's talking about, I suggest that in all cases, the harm caused to the designated assets will be less than substantial. There's a whole sliding scale in planning law about substantial and less than substantial and significant harm to the local area. And it's just describing the exact policy here that applies to. Broadly speaking, I would expect the impact on each asset of this aspect of the scheme to be as follows. St Hill Manor, less than substantial harm at the mid-high end of that scale. Although there may not be direct intervisibility between the house and the field forms a significant part of the wider rural setting within which the manor is appreciated, and particularly affects the character of the approach to it via the historic entrance and driveway through the grounds, which are directly adjacent to the site. There are also a number of viewpoints within the grounds from which views of both the house and site can be appreciated, albeit looking in opposing directions, the impact on which will directly affect the verdant context within which the listed building is currently appreciated. So what she's saying here is it's not just about the field and the development, it's about the field and the development in the context of the Grade 2 listed St Hill house. North Lodge, again, less than substantial harm at the higher end of that scale. During Field is directly adjacent to the lodge and provides a very significant part of its setting. There is clear and direct intervisibility between the site and the lodge. The impact on the context within which this building is appreciated will be fundamentally altered by the current proposal from a discernible, surviving, albeit altered country estate to a much more suburban context. This harm is exacerbated by the placement of the hard landscaped permanent parking area and associated works, including lighting and the toilet block directly adjacent to the lodge. When it's talking about other non-designated heritage assets, i.e. the other buildings of importance and historic value that aren't actually listed, it says here that it's a less than substantial harm at the lower end of that scale for the non-designated heritage assets, which I would consider, based on the limited information in front of us, to be of a moderate level of interest in the local context. Again, a low level of harm. The impact on all of these assets is to the character of the approach to St Hill Green along St Hill Road. The application site is significant in scale, directly adjacent to St Hill Road, and would be fundamentally altered in character from rural to suburban. However, it is at a short distance from St Hill Green with no intervisibility between the two. Again, the placement of the permanent car parking directly adjacent to the road exacerbates this harm. Rockwood Park, a high level of harm to a non-designated heritage asset of a mid-level of interest to the local context. The application site is directly opposite the house at Rockwood Park and diagonally opposite the former stables. It forms a very significant part of the setting of these buildings with direct intervisibility between the two and a strong impact on the character of the immediate approach to the non-designated heritage assets along St Hill Road. The transformation of this field to an extensive car park will have a significant adverse impact on the setting of these buildings. Again, the placement of the permanent car parking is relevant, as will be the alterations to the northern vehicle entrance, which is directly opposite Rockwood Park. Now, let's have a little look at the map here. So for those of you who haven't been to the site, understand exactly what we're talking about. This is just using Google Maps satellite view. You can see just how rural this area is. This is Sussex, it's Mid-Sussex to be precise. And up here on the right-hand side, top right, we can see East Grinstead, which is the town nearest to which the site is located. And if we zoom in here, this is the property we're talking about. So this is St Hill Manor, which is the Grade 2 listed building. This is the castle. This is the Hobbs Field where they erect the giant tent, which we'll get to shortly. And this here is the field where they're planning to put the car park. So all of those comments we've read so far are just relating to this field here. Now you can see here, this is where St Hill Road runs. Let's turn it to the map view so it's a bit easier to see. This is St Hill Road, the narrow country lane. And you can see here, there's one entrance to St Hill Manor. That's reserved for Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard's personal use, even though he died in 1986. He's the only one that's allowed to use that entrance. Up here is the existing entrance. That's the main entrance to the property, which is where we stand and protest. And what they're proposing is a new entrance just up here somewhere into the new field. And you can see where there's already a little bit of a dirt track here. So that's where the new entrance is going to be located. And this is where the car park is. And directly opposite the new entrance is Rockwood Park, which is the residential building that's also a heritage asset. You've also got the East Grinstead Leisure Centre just here. You've got Fonthill Lodge, which is where Scientology's Continental Liaison Office is based, just over here. Again, these are all heritage buildings. And then down here, we have the stables. So this building here on the bottom right, where my mouse is the stables, and the new coal building that was built, and the new coach park that was built a few years ago. This is St Hill Green, and this is the cluster of residential buildings that were mentioned in that as having significance. So St Hill Road runs through this sort of shielded area of shrubbery here, and you can see the car park is directly adjacent to this road. There's also North Lodge, which is this building just here, which you can see just by the entrance to their property. So I hope that gives you a little bit of context around what we're talking about here in terms of location. Let's move on to what the conservation officer has to say about the Hobbs Field, which is the event space itself. Now, let's not forget, as I mentioned earlier, Scientology have not applied for permission to build the tent. They've applied for permission to put in permanent infrastructure in the form of concrete pads in order to facilitate the annual construction of a temporary marquee. They haven't asked for permission to put the marquee up. This marquee is 45,000 square foot, and it absolutely does need planning permission. They've just applied for permission to put the infrastructure in place that would make it easier for them to build the marquee in the future. It's a small point, but it is a significant point, because what it means is Scientology will need to submit an additional or a supplementary planning application to actually secure permission for the tent itself, which they have not done. Now, conservation officer here talking about Hobbs Field. So this is the marquee. The field is set away from St Hill Road and screened from it by woodland and existing buildings around St Hill Manor. I would therefore not consider that the proposed works here will materially affect the settings majority of the assets described above, although they will impact on the setting of the manor itself, which is only a short distance to the east. Although direct intervisibility will be limited, the field has a fairly significant impact on the character of the setting of the manor complex and its immediate grounds, and will contribute strongly to visitors' impression of the rural landscape within which the manor currently sits. The proposed works within this field are less intensive than for During Field, but will undoubtedly affect its currently verdant and largely undeveloped character. The introduction of the hard-surfaced access road, large areas of cell web surfacing, concrete ring beams and pads for the erection of a large marquee, as well as new built form consisting of a toilet block, generator and substation to the eastern side of the field, and the partial regrading of the field will have a potentially significant cumulative impact on the character of the space, even when the marquee is not present. In combination, these works will detract from the historic appearance of the area as an agricultural field. It will become quite apparently an event space. This will detract from the positive contribution which the site currently makes through the setting to St Hill Manor. Again, I would place the harm caused as less than substantial at the mid-range of that scale. Cumulatively, the impact of the works to both fields on St Hill Manor will therefore be at the mid-high end of the less than substantial scale. As submitted, the proposal will be considered contrary to the requirements of the district plan policy, listed buildings and other heritage assets, which states that development will be required to protect listed buildings and their settings. So, in summary, the conservation officer is turning down this application and saying that this whole development will negatively impact the whole site and the protected heritage buildings that are located within it. And that is something that Mid-Sussex District Council will find it very hard to approve, because, as it mentioned, as per the district plan policy, the council has a duty to protect the area of outstanding natural beauty, the countryside, over development of the countryside, and of course the heritage listed buildings. Building works simply will not be approved if they're going to damage a listed building. And that is what the council's conservation officer is saying. And this is nothing but humiliating for the Church of Scientology. And it just goes to show why the Church of Scientology should just simply hold this event somewhere else. There is no reason why they can't hire a purpose-built event venue nearby. There is a showground just around the corner. There's plenty of large event spaces in Brighton. I'm pretty sure there's one or two in Crawley as well, nearby towns. So there's lots of spaces that are available that could be used to host this event. Scientology should simply use those. And indeed, that would have a positive impact on the local economy, because that would mean Scientology is spending money hiring these venues and local staff, rather than hosting the event in their own temporary structure that they build themselves, and they hire from a company that sources the tent itself from overseas. So I think this is a huge step in the right direction when it comes to the planning application. Let's have a look at some of your comments that I've been starring as we've been going on. Love it here says, Alex, I tried buying you coffee, but for some reason it won't recognize my debit card. Why? No clue. It used to, no issues. Interesting. Thank you so much for your comment. And thank you for wanting to support the channel. While we're on that topic, if anybody wants to support the activism that I've been doing, you can do so through Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. There are links in the description. And that's my advice to you, love it. If you do want to support the cause, there's a link to PayPal down below, and hopefully that will accept your card. You can also support the protest. For example, I've set up on Buy Me a Coffee a wish list. We're gonna be protesting outside St Hill at the IES event on the 31st of October. And if you want to support the protest, I've set up a couple of wish list items on Buy Me a Coffee for specific things. So, for example, we want to hire a bagpiper to march us down the road. We've almost got enough money to do that. There's a fund for the planning costs, you know, for the travel down to East Grinstead and the permits and that sort of thing. There's a travel fund if you want to donate towards people who perhaps want to protest but can't afford to get there. There's also other funds for things like flyer delivery that I want to do, restream, you know, to support the channel, fair game if you want to support the fight that I've been against fair game that I've been doing. So those things are there if you want to support the channel on Buy Me a Coffee. There's also merchandise on apostatealex.com, my website. We've come up with this new t-shirt for this year's protest because the theme this year is We Come Back. So if you want to get yourselves some merch, there's a We Come Back t-shirt, and there's also a mug, which I thought was quite fun. This is the mug here. With a similar design on it. So if you want to support the channel and get something in return, that's a good way of doing it. But thank you for your comment, love it, and I hope that you can get your card sorted or donate in other ways. But the number one best, most effective way of supporting the channel is actually not necessarily financially. It's by pressing the like button, by subscribing, by commenting down below. Love it is also saying Amazon wishlist. Yes, there's a link to my wishlist down below that you can donate to as well. I need to put some new stuff on there. I haven't updated it for a while actually. But yes, those are the ways to support the channel. Thank you so much. Let's have a look at some more of these comments. Andy, two arms in the house. Wow, we have a truly international gathering of supporters this evening. Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. Becky, Big Brother fan, says this car park is empty every other week of the year. Yeah, and this is something that Scientology admit to. If you look at the planning application, Scientology's architects admit that the 100 and whatever it was car parking spaces they currently have is more than sufficient for daily use. That means there is less than 100 cars going to St. Hill every single day, which is a far cry from the thousands of Scientologists that the church itself claims they have. Bill Karmetsky here saying, of course, I'm not bitter about Scientology organization, just bitter about the organization tentacles of utter rubbish of no actual power. Well, there you have it. Love It says, why do they use this site as opposed to a more suitable site? Precisely. That's the point. Is I'm not necessarily opposed to Scientology holding an annual gathering. Go ahead, be my guest. If you want to be a Scientologist and you want to part with vast sums of your money and donate to a cause you think is helping but is actually harming people, if you want to believe in OT3 and Xenu, the overgalactic warlord, if you want to bow down to David Miscavige, Be my guest. You have every right to do so. We do have freedom of belief and freedom of religion in this country. You have a right to do that if you so choose. I'm not opposed to them holding this event. I'm opposed to them holding the event at this property because of the damage that it does to the local environment and the heritage asset buildings, the great crested newt habitat, and so on, for all the reasons we've talked about previously. They don't have to hold this event at St. Hill. They could hold it down the road at a purpose-built venue. Thank you, love it. Excellent point. Kestrel 42, but Scientology needs a big erection to prove their importance. Good one. I like that. Rachel Harris asks, Alex, did you ever see inside the big house any weird things in there? Yes, I have visited St. Hill when I was a Scientologist. And Scientology actually have a documentary on their TV channel, Scientology.tv. I mean, it's not a TV channel in the UK. It's just a website that you can go to. But they have a whole tour of the manor house. It's preserved exactly as it was when L. Ron Hubbard lived there. And it's a bit creepy if you ask me. But if you want to see inside the manor, you can go and look on their website and watch the video, or you can try and book a tour yourself. Just don't mention that you watch my channel, because you certainly won't be allowed in. Becky Big Brother fan, they only want to use St. Hill in order to keep visiting IES Scientologists, sealed members and staff compounded on the property. No escape and primed for fundraising. Yes, indeed. In fact, if you go back on my channel far enough, you'll see an interview I did with a former Scientologist called Dave Griffiths, who talks about how he was pressured to part with vast sums of his money to make huge donations to Scientology. And he indeed felt like he had to escape. When he had the opportunity to leave St. Hill, he actually ran for the car park, jumped in his car and drove as far as he could, as fast as he could, to get away from the place. And he was chased down by Scientologists to try and get him back. I've also spoken to former members who have talked about Scientologists trying to escape the tent by literally trying to crawl under the tarpaulin, the outer skin of the tent, to try and escape because they weren't allowed to leave without making a donation to the IES. So I suppose that's one of the main reasons they want to host the event at St. Hill, is because it's all within their own control and they can stop people leaving if they want to. Excellent point, Becky. Rachel Harris, question, are the council going to issue a stop notice? And that is an excellent question to which I do not have the answer. And I would suggest you contact Mid-Sussex District Council complaining about their lack of enforcement of this issue to get an answer from them. Last year, Scientology were issued a planning contravention notice and told next year you need to apply for permission before erecting this giant marquee. And Scientology have subsequently erected the marquee without permission. Mid-Sussex District Council are investigating the matter, and I know they are considering their enforcement actions, but no, they haven't issued a stop notice just yet, and I don't know why. Becky Big Brother fan again, surely Scientology has architects and building planners who are highly qualified and knowledgeable regarding areas of outstanding natural beauty. Yes, but unfortunately they have to do what they're told, because Scientology, especially David Miscavige, the leader, likes to keep a very tight control over everything that Scientology does, especially with big matters like this, and they are micromanaged to the T's, right? So the architects probably, I would imagine, advised Scientology that there's no way this is going to get through the planning application process because it's a huge redevelopment that's going to damage the property and the grade 2 listed building and the environment and so on and so forth. But Scientology are relentless in their efforts to try and get this approved nonetheless. SP Crusader saying, comment, I wonder if they got permission for all the conversion work they did on the stables. My understanding is yes, they did. They also got permission to build the new Quoll building down by the stables. You can look up the history of properties planning applications and so on the Mid-Sussex District Council portal. And there are a large number of applications and things that have been approved. There are also a few that have been rejected over the years. But I think the key thing with this new application is it is such a large development. And when you compound the impact of all of the other developments that have occurred on the property over the years, the council is simply now of the view that this is too much. The site has been overdeveloped and is now at risk of harming the character of the heritage building that is St. Hill House, that Scientology called St. Hill Manor. So It's their own fault. If they hadn't have made these small little additions and changes to their own property over the years, perhaps this application would be approved. But because they've continued adding and changing things over the years, the compounded effect is huge. Kestrel 42 asking, how will they stop them? Well, this is a very good question. The Mid-Sussex District Council are the ones with the power here. It's their call what they do next. My understanding is a stop notice is something that can be considered. If Scientology ignore a stop notice, it then becomes a criminal matter and will be tried in the courts. I don't know what is going on at the minute, but again, a question for Mid-Sussex District Council. SP Crusader Leany is saying, comment, the tent spoils the view from Standon, a National Trust property, and Gravetye Manor, an award-winning and historical hotel. Yeah, this is true. Included in their application is a number of pictures that show the visibility of the site from different viewpoints. But Scientology failed to include the visibility of the site from these two particular places, Standon and Gravetye, which are, again, listed protected heritage assets. And that's something that was noted in the Conservation Officer's report, is that they've neglected to include a number of vantage points that need to be considered in determining whether to approve or deny this application. Excellent point, Leany. Thank you. Valerie Morgan in the house. Hi, Val. Thank you so much for joining. A great article in Scientology Business today, Alex. You are definitely doing excellent work. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Rachel Harris asks, what about the protest? Well, I talked about the protest already, so maybe this comment was before I got to it. But the protest website is iasprotest.com with all the information you could possibly want about where we're gathering, what time, what our plans are, what the signs look like. And if you want to support the protest, you can do so through Buy Me a Coffee on the wish list items that are linked to in the description, or again through PayPal and that sort of thing. You can also help by sharing information about the protest and the link to the protest website on social media. That would be really helpful. And of course, showing up. If you want to attend a protest, it would be great to have as many people there as possible. And finally, Andy Two Arms saying, I'm hoping the council will come after the Church of Scientology after this event, having given them yet another chance to play by the rules. Time will tell. Yes, and this is a really important thing to consider. Scientology play the long game, and so must we. It may be infuriating that yet another year is going past where Scientology are being allowed to get away with this huge event where thousands of Scientologists attend, travel from across Europe to attend this thing. They've put the structure up yet again without permission. They've done severe damage to the local environment. They're going to cause massive disruption to the local community, and they are getting away with it again. But you've got to remember that every year they do this, all it does is add evidence as to why this site is unsuitable for such an event. And we can only hope that next year the council will look at this whole thing combined when they have the outcome of this planning application, and they'll really consider taking enforcement action then, is what I believe will happen. Because once they've submitted their planning application, if it's rejected, Scientology really have no excuse for building this marquee if that's how it happens, if that's what happens next year. So one to keep an eye on. We're playing the long game just like they are, and as always, the most important thing for anybody getting involved in this fight, in the protest, for example, outside the IES event in a couple of weeks, is the activism that we do needs to be led with kindness and compassion. What we want to do is make sure that we are standing there with our signs and we have a message of support, and we are providing that opportunity and the resources to Scientologists who want to leave that they need to set up a new life outside of the organization. We're not against the beliefs, we're against the behaviors. And it is this holier than thou mentality and the bully-like tactics with which Scientology go after its critics and its former members that we are standing there and protest against. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I really appreciate your support and your comments. And please stay tuned for more information about the protest. And as this story about the redevelopment work develops, please check out the article on Scientology Business and the link down below. And I'll see you guys on the next one.